In 1987, they thought they knew. Day after day, they called him just a driver. They made him work the most dangerous routes while white drivers got the safe ones. They laughed when he suggested improvements, dismissed his innovations, and treated his decades of experience like it was worthless. They saw his black skin and decided that was all they needed to see. But Marcus Thompson wasn't just a driver. He was a visionary trapped in a system designed to keep him invisible. Behind the wheel of that delivery truck, he was calculating, planning, and building something they never saw coming, their own replacement. This is the story of how racist assumptions destroyed a multi-million-dollar company, and how one man's refusal to accept less than created an empire that redefined an entire industry. It's about the hidden cost of discrimination, not just to those who suffer it, but to those who practice it. Marcus Thompson's journey from dismissed driver to business owner represents more than personal triumph. It exposes the systematic waste of human potential that occurs when companies undervalue talent based on race. In an industry where black workers comprise significant portions of the workforce, yet face documented discrimination, his story reveals both the problem and the solution. From DHL's $8.7 million discrimination settlement to UPS drivers winning $237 million in racial bias cases, the transportation industry's pattern of racial discrimination has been exposed in courtrooms across America. But Marcus's story is different. It's about how discrimination created its own consequence. When they called him just a driver, they forgot one crucial detail. Drivers know all the routes, including the one that leads straight out of business. You ready to discover what happens when excellence refuses to remain invisible? Marcus Thompson was born in 1955 in Detroit, Michigan, at the height of America's automotive boom. His father, James Thompson, was a line worker at the Ford River Rouge complex, one of the few black men who had fought his way into the plant during the post-war integration. His mother, Ruby, worked nights cleaning offices downtown, ensuring their small family stayed afloat. The Thompson household was built on two unwavering principles: hard work and education. "You're going to know twice as much and work twice as hard," James would tell young Marcus while showing him how to repair engines in their garage. Not because you have to prove yourself to them, but because you need to be ready when your moment comes. Growing up in Detroit during the 1960s and 70s meant witnessing both the promise and the pain of the civil rights era. The transportation industry, in particular, carried deep scars from decades of segregation. Jim Crow laws had historically excluded black workers from skilled positions, relegating them to the most dangerous and lowest-paying jobs. Even as legal segregation ended, informal discrimination persisted through hiring practices, route assignments, and promotion opportunities. Marcus attended Detroit public schools during the tumultuous years of desegregation and busing. He excelled in mathematics and mechanical drawing, often staying after school to work on projects that combined both interests. His teachers recognized his talent for logistics and spatial reasoning, but guidance counselors routinely steered black students away from white-collar careers. "They kept suggesting trade school," Marcus later recalled, "not because I wasn't smart enough for college, but because they couldn't imagine a black kid in their world becoming anything more than a mechanic or driver." After high school, Marcus enrolled at Wayne State University to study industrial engineering. He paid his way through college by working part-time at a local delivery company, Reynolds Logistics, where he first experienced the transportation industry's racial dynamics firsthand. White drivers received the suburban routes, clean, safe, predictable. Black drivers got the inner city, dangerous neighborhoods, difficult deliveries, and the constant risk of violence or theft. But Marcus saw something his supervisors missed. The inner-city routes were actually more complex and required superior problem-solving skills. Navigating tight streets, managing difficult customers, and optimizing deliveries in chaotic environments demanded the kind of strategic thinking that his engineering classes were teaching him. The racial climate of the 1980s transportation industry was characterized by what researchers now call environmental racism, the practice of assigning minority workers to more hazardous conditions. Studies have documented how companies like DHL systematically assigned black employees to higher crime routes, essentially treating their safety as less valuable than that of white workers. After graduating with his engineering degree in 1978, Marcus applied for management positions at various logistics companies. Despite his qualifications, he faced a consistent pattern of rejection. Interviews that started promisingly would cool noticeably when he appeared in person. Companies that had seemed eager to hire him over the phone would suddenly discover that positions had been filled. Frustrated but determined, Marcus returned to Reynolds Logistics, this time as a full-time driver. His plan was simple: learn the sex industry from the ground up while developing the business knowledge he'd need to eventually start his own company. What he didn't anticipate was how brutal the discrimination would become. At Reynolds, Marcus faced what scholars term occupational segregation, the practice of confining minority workers to specific roles regardless of their qualifications. Despite his engineering degree, supervisors treated him as just a driver. When he suggested route optimizations that could save thousands of dollars, managers dismissed his ideas without consideration. When he volunteered for additional responsibilities, he was told to stay in his lane. The company's culture was poisoned by casual racism. Supervisors regularly used racial slurs, assigned black drivers the most dangerous routes, and denied them overtime opportunities given freely to white workers. It was a perfect example of what transportation industry surveys have documented. Nearly 47% of carriers believe racism is an industry-wide problem. But Marcus was playing a longer game. Every slight, every dismissed suggestion, every dangerous route assignment was teaching him something valuable about what not to do. He was building a mental database of inefficiencies, studying customer relationships, and identifying market opportunities that his supervisors were too blinded by prejudice to see. By 1987, after 9 years of being called just a driver, Marcus Thompson was ready to show them what a driver could really do. The breaking point came on a humid Tuesday morning in July 1987. Marcus had just completed his most efficient route optimization yet, a delivery schedule that could save Reynolds Logistics over $50,000 annually in fuel costs and overtime. He had spent months analyzing traffic patterns, customer preferences, and vehicle capacity, creating a masterpiece of logistical efficiency that any Harvard Business School case study would have applauded. As he walked into the dispatch office, Marcus carried his carefully prepared presentation, charts showing time savings, graphs demonstrating cost reductions, and detailed route maps that proved his system's superiority. He had practiced this presentation for weeks, anticipating every possible question or objection. The morning meeting was already in progress. Steve Patterson, the operations manager, was addressing the team of supervisors about rising fuel costs and customer complaints about late deliveries. "We need new ideas," Patterson announced. "Anyone who can help us solve these problems will be rewarded accordingly." Marcus saw his opportunity. He raised his hand and stood up, his presentation materials in hand. "Steve, I've been working on exactly this problem. I've developed a new routing system that could save us significant money and improve our delivery." Thames. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Marcus, the only black person in the room, then back to Patterson. The operation manager's expression shifted from interest to barely concealed annoyance. "Thompson," Patterson said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you're a driver. Routes are determined by people with actual logistics training. Maybe you should focus on the job you're paid to do instead of trying to do mine." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Marcus felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but this time something was different. He had prepared for this moment too carefully to back down. "I have a degree in industrial engineering from Wayne State," Marcus replied, calmly, "and I've been analyzing our routing inefficiencies for 3 years. If you'll just look at the data." "Data," Patterson interrupted, his voice rising. You want to talk about data? Here's some data for you. Drivers who think they're smarter than management usually find themselves looking for new jobs. Now sit down and let the adults handle business planning. The room erupted in laughter. Marcus stood there, holding his presentation, watching men with half his education mock work that represented months of careful analysis. But what happened next crystallized everything he had been feeling for 9 years at Reynolds. Rick Morrison, the route supervisor, leaned back in his chair and grinned. Come on, Steve, give the boy a chance. Maybe he learned something useful in the hood. Those people are pretty good at finding shortcuts. The racist comment hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt the room's energy shift as some supervisors looked uncomfortable while others continued laughing. No one, however, challenged Morrison's words. Patterson smirked. You know what, Thompson? You're right. You are smart. Smart enough to know you're just a driver. And that's all you'll ever be here. So take your little charts and graphs, file them wherever you want, and get back to work. The grown-ups have real business to discuss. As Marcus walked back to his truck, his presentation materials felt heavier than any package he had ever delivered. The humiliation burned, but beneath it was something more powerful: clarity. In that moment, he realized that Reynolds Logistics wasn't just wasting his potential. They were revealing their own weaknesses. The route inefficiencies Marcus had identified weren't just academic exercises. They were bleeding the company money. Every single day, customer complaints about late deliveries were increasing monthly. Fuel costs were spiraling out of control. The company was facing problems that Marcus could solve, but their racism was literally preventing them from accepting solutions. Over the following weeks, the incident's impact rippled through Marcus's daily experience. Patterson and Morrison seemed to take perverse pleasure in assigning him the most difficult routes, often making last-minute changes that forced him to work late into the evening. When white drivers complained about challenging deliveries, they were quickly reassigned. When Marcus raised concerns about increasingly dangerous neighborhoods, he was told that someone like him should be comfortable anywhere in the city. The racism became more overt. Morrison began referring to Marcus as college boy in a tone that made it clear the term wasn't a compliment. Other supervisors started questioning his timesheets, implying that he was trying to steal overtime. They assigned him a truck with perpetual mechanical problems, then criticized him when breakdowns made him late. But something unexpected was happening. Marcus's customers were beginning to notice the difference between his service and that of other drivers. His engineering background led him to optimize not just routes but customer interactions. He memorized preferences, anticipated needs, and solved problems before they became complaints. Businesses that had been dissatisfied with Reynolds' service specifically requested Marcus for their deliveries. Word spread through the business community about the exceptional driver who treated every delivery like it mattered. Store managers began calling Reynolds specifically to schedule deliveries when Marcus was working. Customer satisfaction scores for his routes were consistently higher than any other drivers, a fact that supervisors attributed to luck rather than skill. Marcus began documenting everything: the route inefficiencies he observed, the customer feedback he received, the discrimination he experienced, and the business opportunities he identified. Every night he returned home to his small apartment and added to his growing database of information about Reynolds' operations and market position. The company's problems were becoming more apparent daily. Competitors were capturing accounts by offering better service and lower prices. Employee turnover was high, especially among black drivers who faced constant harassment. Fuel costs continued rising while efficiency remained stagnant. The very issues Marcus had tried to address in his dismissed presentation were pushing Reynolds toward financial crisis. 3 months after the meeting room humiliation, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He would start his own delivery company, not as an act of revenge, but as an inevitable business consequence of Reynolds' racist management practices. They had shown him exactly what not to do. Now he would show them what excellence looked like. His plan was methodical and devastating in its simplicity. He would target Reynolds's most dissatisfied customers with superior service at competitive prices. He would hire the talented drivers that Reynolds dismissed or mistreated. He would implement the routing innovations that had been rejected because of their source, rather than their merit. Marcus Thompson was about to teach Reynolds logistics, the most expensive lesson in business history. When you call someone just a driver, you might discover they know exactly where they're driving, and it's straight to your competition. The real competition was about to begin. Starting Thompson Express Logistics in 1988 meant confronting obstacles that white entrepreneurs never faced. Marcus had the business plan, the technical expertise, and the customer relationships. But he quickly discovered that having a vision and securing funding were entirely different challenges when you were a black man in Reagan's America. His first stop was First National Bank, where he had maintained a perfect payment record on his car loan for 5 years. Armed with detailed financial projections, customer commitments, and his engineering credentials, Marcus felt confident about securing a small business loan. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. Mr. Thompson, the loan officer explained, with practiced sympathy, the transportation industry is very capital-intensive and highly competitive. Small minority businesses in this sector have a challenging track record. Perhaps you should consider something more manageable, like a franchise opportunity. The rejection stung, but it wasn't unexpected. Research has documented how black entrepreneurs face systematic lending discrimination, with loan applications rejected at twice the rate of comparable white-owned businesses. Marcus had prepared for this possibility. His second strategy was more creative. Rather than seeking traditional bank loans, he leveraged his own savings, borrowed against his engineering degree through a Wayne State alumni fund, and convinced 3 of his customers to provide partial advance payments in exchange for guaranteed service contracts. It wasn't enough capital for a full launch, but it was sufficient for a proof of concept. The emotional toll was significant. Starting a business while working full-time at Reynolds meant 18-hour days, 7 days a week. Marcus would complete his Reynolds routes, then spend evenings and weekends servicing his own clients. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. Social relationships withered, as every spare moment was devoted to building his company. His family relationships suffered. Under the strain, his girlfriend, Sandra, grew frustrated with canceled dinner plans and missed events. "You're killing yourself for a dream that might not work," she told him during one particularly heated argument. "Maybe you should just accept what you have, instead of risking everything for what you might get." But Marcus had seen too much to turn back. Every day at Reynolds reinforced his conviction that the company was fundamentally broken. Route inefficiencies continued to cost thousands of dollars monthly. Customer complaints increased as Patterson and Morrison doubled down on their authoritarian management style. The racism that had always existed became more overt as supervisors realized Marcus was planning to leave. Morrison, in particular, seemed to take personal pleasure in making Marcus's final months at Reynolds as difficult as possible. He assigned the most problematic routes, scheduled last-minute changes that made completion nearly impossible, and documented every minor infraction with unusual detail. "Planning to start your own little delivery service?" Morrison would ask with a smirk. "Good luck competing with the big boys." What Morrison didn't realize was that his harassment was actually valuable market research. Every problem he created for Marcus became a case study in what Thompson Express would do differently. Superior communication with drivers, flexible scheduling that respected employee needs, fair route assignments based on logic rather than favoritism. Marcus was building a company culture in direct opposition to everything Reynolds represented. The business community's response to Thompson Express was mixed and revealing. Some potential clients expressed enthusiasm about working with a local minority-owned business. Others were skeptical about Marcus's ability to compete with established companies. A few were openly discriminatory, making it clear that they preferred working with white-owned firms regardless of service quality. Marcus's breakthrough came from an unexpected source: his existing customers at Reynolds. Word had spread through the business community about the exceptional driver who was starting his own company. 3 major clients, a medical supply distributor, a restaurant chain, and an auto parts manufacturer, approached Marcus directly about switching their business to Thompson Express. The defections caught Reynolds management completely off guard. When Patterson learned that Marcus was poaching major accounts, his response was predictably racist and ultimately self-destructive. Rather than examining why customers preferred Marcus's service, Patterson began calling potential clients to warn them about the unreliable nature of minority-owned businesses. The strategy backfired spectacularly. Business owners who had worked with Marcus for years were offended by Patterson's implications. Several clients who had been considering Thompson Express decided to switch immediately, partly out of anger at Reynolds' racist assumptions about their judgment. Marcus documented every discriminatory comment, every attempt at sabotage, and every client interaction. He was building a legal case, but more importantly, he was creating a competitive advantage. While Reynolds wasted energy on racist retaliation, Thompson Express focused entirely on service excellence. The company's unofficial launch in early ACO 1989 was both exhilarating and terrifying. Marcus had secured enough clients to justify leaving Reynolds, but success was far from guaranteed. He was competing against a company with superior resources, established relationships, and decades of market presence. His advantages were limited: better service, innovative routing, and the hunger that comes from having everything to prove. The first 6 months tested every assumption Marcus had made about the market. Some clients remained loyal to Reynolds, despite service problems, valuing stability over innovation. Others switched to Thompson Express but demanded pricing that made profitability nearly impossible. Marcus found himself working 19-hour days, driving routes during the day and handling administration at night. The breakthrough came in month 7, when Marcus hired his first employee, James Washington, a talented black driver who had been systematically mistreated at Reynolds. Washington brought not only driving skills, but intimate knowledge of Reynolds' operational weaknesses and customer frustrations. Together, they began implementing the innovations that Marcus had developed during his years as just a driver: advanced route optimization, proactive customer communication, flexible scheduling that reduced overtime costs while improving service. Every improvement was a direct response to problems they had observed at Reynolds. By the end of 1989, Thompson Express had captured 15% of Reynolds' former market share. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with survival. He was planning for dominance. The discrimination that had nearly broken his spirit was about to become his greatest competitive advantage. The war between Thompson Express and Reynolds Logistics reached its decisive moment in the spring of 1991. When Marcus secured the contract that would change everything. Metro Medical Systems, the largest healthcare supply distributor in southeastern Michigan. The $2.8 million annual account represented more than just revenue. It was a statement that Thompson Express could compete with any company in the region. But winning the contract required Marcus to demonstrate capabilities that most people still believed a black-owned business couldn't possess. The procurement process was brutal. Metro Medical's logistics director, Patricia Chen, had standardized requirements that would test every aspect of Thompson Express's operations: real-time tracking systems, backup vehicle protocols, regulatory compliance documentation, and 24/7 customer service capabilities. These were capabilities typically associated with companies 10 times Thompson Express's size. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Thompson," Chen told him during their initial meeting. "You're competing against Reynolds and 2 other established firms. Your prices are competitive, but I need to know you can handle our volume without compromising quality. One missed delivery to a hospital could cost lives." Marcus knew this was his moment. Everything he had built, every innovation he had developed, every lesson learned from years of discrimination at Reynolds, culminated in this presentation. He had 2 hours to prove that Thompson Express wasn't just another small business trying to punch above its weight. It was the future of logistics excellence. The presentation was flawless. Marcus demonstrated routing algorithms that reduced delivery times by 23% compared to industry standards. He showed real-time tracking capabilities that provided clients with minute-by-minute shipment updates. Most importantly, he presented customer satisfaction data that was unprecedented in the industry. 98.7% on-time delivery, 0 lost shipments, and customer retention rates that exceeded anything Metro Medical had seen. But the real revelation came when Marcus addressed the room's unspoken concern about working with a Black-owned business. Without directly mentioning race, he systematically dismantled every stereotype by presenting data that spoke louder than prejudice. Excellence isn't about the size of your company or how long you've been in business, Marcus told the procurement committee. It's about understanding that every package carries someone's trust and treating that trust as sacred. Thompson Express exists because we saw an industry that had stopped innovating and started settling for good enough. We decided that our customers deserved better. Chen's team spent 3 weeks evaluating all proposals. During that time, Marcus learned that Reynolds was conducting a whisper campaign designed to undermine Thompson Express's credibility. Morrison and Patterson were calling Metro Medical's executives, suggesting that a minority-owned business couldn't handle such a large account reliably. The racism that had once confined Marcus to the worst routes was now being deployed as a business strategy. Reynolds was betting that corporate decision-makers would ultimately choose the safe option of an established white-owned company over the risky choice of innovative Black ownership. They were wrong. On April 15, 1991, Chen called Marcus personally to deliver the news. Thompson Express had won the Metro Medical contract, but her explanation revealed just how decisively Marcus had outperformed the competition. Your proposal wasn't just better than the others, Chen told him. It was in a different category entirely. Your innovations could revolutionize how we think about medical supply logistics. But there's something else you should know. Reynolds' attempt to undermine you actually sealed our decision. Any company that competes through character assassination rather than service excellence isn't a company we want to work with. The Metro Medical contract triggered an avalanche. Within 6 months, Thompson Express had secured 12 additional major accounts, many specifically choosing to leave Reynolds after learning about the Whisper campaign. Marcus's customer base expanded from regional businesses to national corporations, seeking the innovation that traditional logistics companies couldn't provide. Reynolds Logistics, meanwhile, was hemorrhaging accounts and facing a financial crisis. The company that had called Marcus just a driver was discovering the true cost of their discriminatory practices. Customer defections accelerated as word spread about Thompson Express's superior service. Employee morale plummeted as talented drivers left for opportunities at Marcus's company. By December 1991, Reynolds had lost over 40% of their customer base to Thompson Express and other competitors. Patterson was fired by the company's board of directors. Morrison was demoted to a warehouse position. The company that had believed racism was a sustainable business strategy was learning that excellence eventually defeats prejudice in competitive markets. But Marcus's victory was about more than business success. It was about proving that discrimination doesn't just harm its victims. It weakens the entire system that practices it. Reynolds hadn't just lost customers. They had revealed the intellectual poverty of racist thinking in competitive environments. As 1991 ended, Thompson Express employed 47 people, operated a fleet of 32 vehicles, and generated $8.2 million in annual revenue. Marcus Thompson, the man they had called just a driver, had driven his former employer to the brink of bankruptcy while building the most innovative logistics company in the Midwest. The student had become the master. The driver had reached his destination. By 1995, Thompson Express Logistics had fundamentally transformed the transportation industry landscape in southeastern Michigan. What began as one man's response to workplace discrimination had evolved into a revolutionary business model that other companies struggled to match. The numbers told the story of complete market disruption. Thompson Express now generated $23 million in annual revenue, employed over 200 people, and operated facilities in 4 states. Marcus had proven that a company built on principles of innovation and inclusion could outperform traditional competitors who relied on established relationships and discriminatory practices. Reynolds Logistics, meanwhile, had ceased operations in early 1994. The company that once dominated the regional market couldn't survive the combination of customer defections, operational inefficiencies, and the reputational damage from their racist business practices. Their final clients switched to Thompson Express or other competitors who offered the service excellence that Reynolds had never prioritized. The transformation went far beyond financial metrics. Thompson Express had become a case study in business schools across the country, demonstrating how diversity and innovation created competitive advantages that homogeneous organizations couldn't match. Harvard Business School developed a curriculum, module around Marcus's routing algorithms, which had become industry standards adopted by logistics companies nationwide. Marcus's hiring practices deliberately sought talent from communities that traditional companies overlooked. Thompson Express employed a workforce that was 60% minority and 40% female, demographics that would have been unimaginable in the transportation industry just a decade earlier. But these weren't diversity quotas. They were strategic business decisions based on Marcus's belief that the best ideas come from diverse perspectives. The results validated his approach. Employee retention rates at Thompson Express exceeded 90%, compared to industry averages below 60%. Customer satisfaction remained above 98%, creating loyal relationships that competitors couldn't break. Innovation accelerated as employees from different backgrounds brought unique insights to operational challenges. The ripple effects extended throughout the broader business community. Other minority entrepreneurs, inspired by Marcus's success, launched companies in industries that had historically excluded them. Banks that had once redlined black business owners began actively seeking diverse clients, recognizing the profitability of inclusive lending practices. Marcus's personal transformation was equally remarkable. The man who had been dismissed as just a driver was now keynoting conferences, serving on corporate boards and mentoring the next generation of minority business leaders. He had established the Thompson Foundation, providing microloans and technical assistance to minority-owned startups in transportation and logistics. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of his success was the industry-wide changes it had catalyzed. Companies throughout transportation began examining their own discriminatory practices, realizing that racism wasn't just morally wrong, it was economically destructive. The documented pattern of discrimination that had plagued the industry was finally facing systematic challenge from companies that competed on merit rather than privilege. The story of Thompson Express had become more than a business success. It was a proof of concept for economic justice. Marcus had demonstrated that when barriers to opportunity are removed, talent flourishes in ways that benefit entire communities. His company's success created jobs, generated tax revenue, and proved that diversity isn't just socially responsible, it's economically essential. In 1998, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from Patricia Chen at Metro Medical Systems. The company had grown significantly since awarding Thompson Express their first major contract, and Chen wanted to share something important. "Marcus," she said, "I've been in procurement for 20 years, and I've never seen a business transformation like yours. But there's something else. Your success changed how we evaluate all our vendors. We now prioritize innovation and service excellence over established relationships. Thompson Express didn't just win our business. You changed how we think about business." That conversation crystallized the true impact of Marcus's journey. He hadn't just overcome discrimination. He had created a new standard for what business excellence looked like. Companies across industries were adopting Thompson Express's practices: inclusive hiring, innovative problem-solving, and the radical idea that treating people with dignity was actually a competitive advantage. The man they had called just a driver had driven change throughout an entire industry. He had proven that racism isn't just morally bankrupt, it's economically unsustainable when forced to compete against excellence. Marcus Thompson's story illuminates a truth that bigots throughout history have refused to acknowledge. Discrimination doesn't just harm its victims, it impoverishes everyone who practices it. Reynolds Logistics didn't fail because they were unlucky. They failed because racism made them stupid. When companies dismiss talent based on race, they're not just being unfair. They're voluntarily handicapping themselves in competitive markets. Every innovation rejected, every perspective silenced, every brilliant mind labeled as just a driver, represents potential that strengthens competitors instead of enhancing their own capabilities. The transportation industry's documented problems with discrimination, from DHL's $8.7 million settlement to UPS drivers winning $237 million judgments, aren't just legal liabilities. They're symptoms of an industry that has systematically wasted human capital for generations. Marcus's legacy extends far beyond Thompson Express's success. He proved that businesses built on inclusive excellence don't just compete with discriminatory companies, they make them obsolete. His story joins a tradition of Black entrepreneurs who transformed discrimination into economic empowerment, following pathways carved by pioneers like Reginald Lewis and John H. Johnson. Today, Thompson Express continues operating as one of the Midwest's premier logistics companies. Marcus serves on multiple corporate boards, mentors emerging entrepreneurs, and advocates for inclusive business practices. But his greatest achievement may be this: no one will ever again be able to call someone just a driver without remembering the man who drove bigotry out of business. Challenge discrimination wherever you encounter it, in hiring, contracting, or everyday business interactions. Support minority-owned businesses that compete on excellence. Recognize that diversity isn't charity, it's competitive advantage. Remember, excellence always defeats prejudice. The only question is how much talent we're willing to waste before we learn that lesson. What route will you take toward justice?